Microphones are on.
Yep. Now, are there any additional items that go in the other business?
On OB1, Councillor Reid, this is the topic near and dear to her heart, so she specifically asked that we defer discussion on it. So I'm quite comfortable with that in recognition of her absence.
Okay. Let's, Madam Clerk, note that.
Thank you.
We can defer that. Any new ones? No new ones. Okay.
Great. Our first item is the minutes of the Council and Committee meeting held on Monday, October 19th. The recommendation is that the committee approve the minutes.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, seconded by Councillor Marsden. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously.
Our second item is the minutes of the Council and Committee meeting held on Monday, October 26th. The recommendation is that the committee approve the minutes.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Marsden. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously.
Our third item is the first delegation. I would like to invite Ms. Susan Foster of the Tri-Cities Early Childhood Development Committee to please come forward for a presentation on their 2015 to 2018 strategic plan.
Hello, I have packages, so I'll just hand these around. You? Oops. Yeah, do you want to just take some over to the other side? Some this way.
Yes, s'il vous plaît.
All right. So I know I've got my 5 minutes. It's nice to see you all. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Susan Foster. I work for the Ministry of Children and Family Development, and I coordinate the early childhood table here in the Tri-Cities. So this, I can just use this for the clicker, is that? Okay, excellent. So I'll very quickly kind of go through some background, and then I just want to give you a bit of an update about our most recent strategic plan. Also just wanted to let you know that I have a couple of members of my committee here with me today to support me in the presentation, and Johannes, who is our new Tri-Cities Literacy Outreach Coordinator, and Angelo Lamb, who is our Middle Childhood Table Coordinator. All right, so ECD committee, we're really here to support capacity of early child development, and our vision is around making sure children have the opportunities necessary to develop to their full potential. Our mission is really around availability and accessibility of early childhood services for children and their families. We have a cross-section of individuals, service providers, representatives from all levels of government, and people must be from the Tri-Cities with an interest in early childhood development and community partnerships to be part of our committee. There's a picture of some of our members. I did a little Wordle just to make it less boring as to all of our organizations, but there is, in your package, there is something called accomplishments, and on the back of the accomplishments lists all of the organizations. But yeah, I thought it was a little bit more fun than just listing them all by bullets, so you can guess who they all are. But the City of Coquitlam does sit on the committee, and it's great to have people there. We usually have Michael Fox from the Pine Tree Community Center. Accomplishments, again, I did sort of a fun thing here, but we've done a lot of things, and I have included an accomplishment sheet in your package. A lot of you are aware of our accord, of our Champions Awards that we do, Healthy Kids Fair, we have a website, so there's lots of information around the different activities that we do. Early childhood development is, we're talking birth to 6. And why is it important? Because on average, 25% of children are not ready for kindergarten when they enter school, and in Tri-Cities that is actually at 30%, which I know people find very shocking and surprising, but it's actually, we're very consistent with the trend across the rest of the province as far as that's concerned, and it's actually gotten worse over the last 10 years. So we were slightly higher about 3 years ago at 33%, so we've improved slightly, but really what your goal is 10 to 15%, because you're always going to have about 10% that have some kind of vulnerability. We really, with the way our community is and the wealth and other factors that we have, we shouldn't be at 30%. So I could spend all day telling you theories about why that is, and we could have a really long discussion, but I don't have time for that right now. But that's why early childhood is so important, and why it's really important to work with kids before they're entering school. So the kinds of service we're talking about are these typical kinds of things: childcare, literacy, recreation, early intervention therapies, family support, and maternal and child health. The kinds of things that are already existing in our community, I think a lot of you are probably aware of, and I know the city is part of many of these programs and supports them as well. So in terms of our strategic plan, we've had a strategic plan in place since 2005, and so now we're on our most recent version of it. And our 4 areas are to sustain delivery of high-impact services and initiatives, to expand relationships and networks, to connect diverse organizations, groups, and communities, and to support shared learning. So that's really how the committee functions. And I've included an executive version of our plan for you to look through. I also have the more in-depth version with our actual, really detailed work plan if you're interested, but I kind of thought you might not want that much detail, but if you do, I have some copies with me. So in terms of highlights, we're really looking at exploring family-friendly business strategy, expanding relationships with our municipal partners, because we do feel that that is something that we could improve upon. We want to continue to raise the awareness of early childhood development opportunities and supports and the need for progressive public policies. And we want to really focus on neighborhood initiatives, because we do feel that the research is showing us that neighborhoods is really someplace where we could make a difference, and also that a lot of families with young children are not connected to their neighbors. They don't feel like they even have a neighbor that they can call on in an emergency, and that's concerning. So focus areas for this particular year: as I said, to strengthen our relationship with the business community, promote the concept of family-friendly business, expand and build on our Children's Accord, which I know you've signed on to for the last 7 years, I think it is, and our Tri-Cities Children's Charter, which is a brand new document that we've been working on with middle childhood. We've had lots of input from children around this, and we will be bringing that out to you in a few months with some kids, so that you can really get a flavor for what that is and how we're going to implement it. But it's very exciting. The children have identified 12 areas that they really feel we should be focusing on related to children's rights. So it's actually really, really great. We're going to continue promoting healthy child development through outreach and distribution of materials, and we're going to continue to focus on our Screen Smart initiative, which is our Unplug and Connect posters, which Angelo actually designed and which are in your package. And we're also looking, we've just struck a Healthy Living working group with middle childhood, where we're really trying to look at 5210, which is 5 fruits and vegetables, no more than 2 hours of screen time a day, 1 hour of physical activity a day, and 0 sugar sweetened drinks. So we're really wanting to look at promoting that message across the Tri-Cities, because we think that that could be a really positive thing. And ideas for city involvement: just to continue to support the Accord and embrace the Children's Charter, continue to host the Healthy Kids Fair every 3rd year, which will be next year for you guys in not 2016, but 2017. Work with us to promote healthy child development messages and initiatives, and work with us on any neighborhood-based projects that you might be thinking about doing. That's it. So I don't know if you have questions or...
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah.
Anybody have questions or comments? Well, I got a question.
Okay.
So that 30% figure, which you
Yes.
said you could talk about,
I can.
Is a lot of that connected to new Canadians and inability to speak the language, perhaps? Or is it,
You know,
I'm sure it's more complex.
Yeah,
than that,
it really is more complex. And that's a great question, because I know a few years ago when those results started coming out, and we were looking, so the way that the Early Development Instrument is organized, there's 5 different domains, and one of them, in fact, is language and communication, and that used to actually be our weakest area. And so we attributed that to newcomer families, because the kinds of questions, kindergarten teachers fill this tool out, so the kinds of questions they were being asked is, how does the child communicate? Do they know, are they able to tell a story? These kinds of things. And so initially, yes, we did think that that had a big bearing on it, but what they did out at UBC was they actually reorganized the results and pulled that scale out completely. and I just looked at the other 4 scales, and the vulnerabilities were still really high.
Oh.
So you can't, yes, there is an influence for sure on the overall results, but it cannot be explained simply as sort of a newcomer adjustment thing. It's way more complex, and actually the scale that we're seeing the most concern around right now is something called social competence. So it's really children's social skills. So what kindergarten teachers are seeing is children are arriving in kindergarten not able to socialize appropriately and not able to get along with others, and there's many possibilities about why that's happening. We have to be very careful not to point fingers at parents, point fingers at teachers, point fingers at childcare or anything like that, but I think when you look at our society and the way it is now and the pace of it, we think time poverty is a huge factor. We think parents are really overburdened and really busy and really stressed. And we also think that technology is having a negative impact on kids' development in some ways. We think there's a lot of positive things with technology, but we also see, and that's why we've been working on Screen Smart. And we're not saying screen free because that's not realistic, but Screen Smart is something, I'm sure we've all seen it. We've seen the 1.5-year-old with the smartphone in the stroller, right? And we're just like, ugh. But that's a reality. So I think there's a lot of factors, and it's really hard to say why, but we are consistent with the rest of the province, so it's not like we're in an anomaly here in Coquitlam, but it's still concerning. It really is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No other questions?
Just about parks. I mean, the spaces that you meet and congregated is at parks. So do you have any thoughts on how we can make parks, I guess it's the parents that we need to kind of get socializing and...
I think we've done a lot more. The city does a lot of great programs, and we have this map, which is being reprinted, which is why I didn't bring you guys all a copy, but this map also has all the parks on it, and this is our resource map. I'll pass it around if you want to look at it. But we've also been doing a program with our family literacy group, which Anne and I co-chair, which is called Stories Galore and More, which is stories in the park in the summer. We've had a tremendous uptake for that. We've had really great attendance. So I think there is a lot of potential for bringing people together, and yeah, I think maybe neighborhood activities being organized in parks is probably a good strategy. I know that for the Avenues of Change project, which used to be called My Neighborhood, My Future, if any of you are familiar with it, that the United Way is funding. It's mostly over in Port Coquitlam, but a little bit of Coquitlam is in it as well. And in that particular project, in the first phase, part of their outreach to community was to organize block parties. And it was amazing how many neighbors were afraid to even organize a party because they didn't think any of their neighbors would come. And so we had to sort of provide coaching. And once they were coached and they felt supported, it was amazing. And people came to their block parties and people connected, but it was people did not know each other. Like, it was really, really something. And so I think providing those opportunities for neighbors to get together, we provided a $200 grant so they could buy meat for the barbecue.
So that's synergies with what we're doing next year.
Yeah.
So maybe there's an opportunity to get the information out through
absolutely
their groups too.
Yeah, and I know that you are doing a lot for the 125th, and I know one of the things is the block party, so I was really excited to hear that. Yeah.
Plus, our Parks, Rec, and Culture Department has a new Abundant Communities initiative.
Yes, and we've been connecting with Jerry about that. So we're really excited to work with the city on that for sure.
Excellent.
Very excited.
Good, that can only help. Chris,
As a
Councillor
council
Wilson.
rep on the committee, I just want to thank you and Angelo for all the great work you guys are doing, and just let you know that we really appreciate it, and it's making a big difference.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much for
Thank
coming
you.
in today.
Thanks so much for your time. If you have any questions,
We know where to reach you.
you know where to find me.
Thank
And
you very
the
much.
health website has all the information about the EDI.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk.
Item 4 is a delegation. I would like to invite Mr. Nathan Woods and Mr. Bill Muirhead, representing Unifor Local 111, to please come forward. They would like to discuss TransLink transit service and bus emissions.
Hi. Yes, hello. Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. Timely. We saw a article in Saturday's, page 813 of Saturday's Sun about this exact issue. So,
Yes.
TransLink to replace diesel buses that made people feel ill was the.
So Friday, Metro Vancouver met and discussed an amendment and a recommendation to purchase 62 replacement CTS coaches for the Tri-City area as a result of fumes exposure to both passengers and riders. One of the biggest issues that also developed out of this that I think needs to be properly reported to the city of Coquitlam and other Tri-City service areas. Bill Muirhead's the unit chair, so to speak, of Port Coquitlam Transit Centre, representing nearly 500 workers there, and a large majority of them are community shuttle operators. One of the things that we do know is the impact of this concern has raised, and it's focusing on the last final pages of the report that was at Metro Vancouver, and it's really key here to note that as much as we've been ramping up the concerns about the fumes and toxicity of it, and in particular the workers' health, the issues here that are part of the project description, as well as the key and final issue, is service reliability. So transit services out here in Coquitlam have been severely impacted over the last 18 months as a result of the ongoing issues with transit services and these buses being parked. Bill's going to get into a little bit more of that. But this issue began back in 2013 as drivers complained about the noxious fumes, and after much resistance at that time it was resolved, and it wasn't anything near the issue that is a part of the class action lawsuit against Navistar. Beginning in 2014 and through to today, this issue has developed, and it's suspected from a faulty engine manufactured by Navistar International. And there is a class action lawsuit internationally for this, and for much of the time throughout our recent experience, it certainly felt like we were the canaries in the mine. As we were working, trying to find the issues for the last 18 months, our members have been exposed. There has been over 126 members who have been exposed to noxious fumes. There's 12 approved WorkSafe claims as a result of that. Passengers as well have made complaints to TransLink with regard to the toxicity and fumes exposure. So when you have a number of transit workers vomiting as a result of being at work, then that tells you there's something wrong that needs to be looked at. TransLink pulled more than a third of the international buses off the road for further testing, saying the results so far are within WorkSafe limits and there is no threat to public safety. Yet drivers complain that toxic fumes are leaking into the cabins of 62 of these coaches. The shuttles were bought in 2013 for $3.8 million, and so far, like I've said, 126 members have been exposed. So while TransLink might report to you that there are no losses, according to the figures that have been provided by TransLink, the average bus in 2014 suffered a vehicle failure, and this is a the entire fleet as a reference point. They suffer a vehicle failure every 22,000 kilometers, and of that, 79,000 is reliability or of a particular route, and that's a 26% decline over the previous 2013 year. With a third of the Tri-City area fleet removed, because that's really what happened. 25 buses were parked. In many cases, service delays, as noted by our members who sat in depots with no bus available for assignment to your routes. So we continue to see the struggles, and today I could get into the other component to this, which is the optimizations, which I think is a secondary issue. So I'm going to let Bill catch up on some of what the effect of was to your riders as a result of the buses being parked.
Now, before Mr. Muirhead begins, both Mayor Stewart and Councillor Adamson wanted to speak. Do you want to wait to the end?
We'll wait for both presentations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Woods. Mr. Muirhead.
Well, this has been a long process for us. Like I said, I'm the property rep at our property. I work really closely with our health and safety committee. It's something that's been very heartfelt for me. It's been very hard. It's consumed me for like 7 days a week, 24/7. I get phone calls from the members that are crying on the phone. I have community shuttle base as a lot of female operators. There's a good chance for them to get a really good paying job, good benefits and that stuff. So a lot of them have been trying to get pregnant. So the problem we've been having is the concern. The concern for, the unborn child, that, in this case, because acrolein has been identified as one of the poisons that's coming into the bus. It's actually a product of burnt fuel, not to mention raw diesel being spewed out the side of the motor and any other fumes that are coming inside the coach. So there was that aspect of it, and it's been very, very problematic. They've been bringing in some decommissioned buses to try to get some of those concerns with people that had those concerns, get them back into the working force, because they were having WCB claims and were off because they just did not want to drive these buses anymore. Not to mention that most of our fleet are in community areas as your own, and they're picking up elderly people with breathing issues. They're picking up school children, young children in strollers, young mothers. So there is all that aspect, not to mention the workforce being made sick. It was a comment that was made as this was going on that Eagle Ridge Hospital was now the new driver's lounge for our company. There'd be any day there could be 3 to 4 people sitting in there waiting to get tests done and being rushed there by Coquitlam Fire Department and given oxygen because they were vomiting, they were dizzy. I mean, acrolein was used in World War I as a deterrent to stop forces from fighting. So it enables you can't breathe, your eyes, you can't see, so obviously you can't fight. So that was one of the things they used. So we've been working with Coast Mountain closely on this. It's been very tough go, as you can see. It's been a long time since 2013. We're in 2015 now. It's very hard for me because it creates an issue for us, that the possibility of layoffs if we get all these buses off the roads, right? So it draws another problem for us. There was a fire up on Pine Tree and Arrowsmith Way on September 25th at 6:18 in the afternoon, which is in your community here, and the results have come back kind of inconclusive. They really don't know what caused the fire. I would venture a guess that if we've been having all these issues with fumes, and there has to be an ignition source, obviously. Something's happened. We won't be getting any information from Navistar from what they're saying because it's a patent issue. I don't know what. I won't get into that part of it. The service reliability, being the property rep on the floor at the depot, I would work from 5:26 in the morning. I would come in the morning, and there would be community shuttle operators sitting there waiting for coaches. Anywhere from 5 up to 10, sometimes 15 operators waiting for buses. So that directly affected your community. There was no service out there. When this started to go down, they started to bring in 300 series coaches, which is what you had in your community before. They were designated for train runs because they were trying to get the people to the West Coast Express, because those people the runs were completely missing, which turned into another problem with the driver that was the third driver to show up when 2 buses were missing. Now everybody's angry. So it created another issue for us, that the drivers were being put through this stress because they were the frontline employees, they were the frontline workers that were getting the questions. They were getting, why aren't these buses showing up? Now, I don't know what they've been telling Coquitlam. I don't know what they're telling the people when they're phoning in, because we're not privy to that information. But I can tell you there was definite service reliability issues on this, because I seen it. 10 to 15 operators sitting in the morning, in the AM, and in the PM. So
thank you very much for that. So now that I'm not sure if you're asking us to do anything, and now that Metro Vancouver directors have approved the expenditure of more than $9 million to buy 62 new buses, are you asking us to do anything more above that, or just make us aware of the background?
Well, I think the problem we have right now is that that's like 6 months away. They're saying they're going to be bringing some buses into Surrey, some Chevrolet buses, the gas buses they're going to be bringing in. We're not our depot's not a gas depot. It's diesel and CNG. So gas buses wouldn't really work for us. We'd have to take them out to local gas stations and fill them. And we do that in other areas. I think what's going to happen is they're going to transfer some of the 300 series buses to us. The problem is we have another 6 months to go. when which is a huge problem for anybody that's been made sick. I mean, we got some people that have been fumed 7, 8, 9 times.
Thank you. Mayor Stewart, then Councillor Asmussen.
Thank you for coming. As you know, I have the distinct honor of sitting on the Mayor's Council for Regional Transportation, which has absolutely nothing to do with anything to do with regional transportation. We get to decide the salaries of key executives, and that's it. And so we are as frustrated about this. We hate it when TransLink comes to us and virtually holds a gun to our regional head and says, please give us some money or else we won't be able to run buses on your routes. Ultimately, this is this council has been very strong and deliberate in our attempt to promote the use of public transit. You can't promote public transit if it's not safe and reliable, and in this circumstance, it certainly isn't reliable. And we've heard from lots of our residents that have switched because of the reliability question, and of course the safety question is significant as well. So we expect TransLink to solve this problem immediately. I've spoken to them myself, and I know other members of council have, because this has to get fixed. And unfortunately, we have about as much influence, I suspect, as you, or perhaps even less than you. So we're going to do everything we can. Ultimately, if they can't fix this problem, they have to start building big parking lots at the new SkyTrain stations, because as it is, we're not going to have enough. Even if they fix it, we're not going to have any place to put the cars that are in neighborhoods that aren't served by transit. But the ones that are served by transit, but the bus doesn't come reliably, that's a game changer right there. Well, we're going to have a massive issue on our hands. So, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Asmussen.
Just a few questions. The company, NASTAR, was had a class action lawsuit, you said 2008. Transit bought their buses 2012, 13. So they would have known at that time that they were buying buses that had a defect or it was in a lawsuit.
Correct.
The $3.8 million they paid for that coaches, was that, I've heard some people say that was a discounted price. Do we know
$61,000 a bus, if you do the math. That's pretty cheap.
Yeah, so did they buy a bus knowing, this is something.
Same as a Highlander.
Yeah, so
if I could just answer that, in response to what Metro Vancouver is doing for the replacement coaches, the same amount of coaches are costing $10 million.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I'm raising the question here, is that the TransLink more than should be, how can I say this, more than, I want to put in the right words, but
We all want to be a little careful there.
but I would say that are negligent in causing this problem by, one, that in doing diligence in purchasing equipment, they should have realized an issue with a lawsuit. Number two, by purchasing at such a cheap price. And it's not the first time they did this. They did this back with the Orions many years ago with another issue of fumes inside a vehicle.
What motor was in that bus?
I don't know.
International.
It was.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know that. I don't remember that. But it's just an issue, right?
Okay.
So now the $9.2 million that's going to replace these community shuttles that we won't get for 6 months at least, what is that going to affect orders or other things that would have been used the $9.2 million for? Are we losing any other?
No, and I don't know whether this is actually coming from, and I'm not a guru when it comes to it, but this is coming from the federal gas tax, 8-year project plan. So where the exact money is not going to be spent in the future, that's I'm not certain where that's a question TransLink could probably answer.
Maybe, Richard, I thought I read that there was going to be some conventional equipment from that.
I've got the clipping from the Sun here. It says the TransLink is asking to use. You got it, Richard?
I have facts, but go with the newspaper.
Okay.
Meeting.
TransLink was asking the mayors to use the money left over from the purchase of new handy dart buses, as well as money set aside to buy 24 diesel-powered community shuttles in 2015, those projects had been on the priority list for 2014-2015 gas tax revenues. So looks like it's coming out of that.
Okay. The other thing is, I guess my question, do you know from Navstar that has TransLink been paying, there was retrofits early on, I remember, of the fuel tanks on these issues and other issues that have happened. Do we know that, is TransLink upfronting any of the costs for these, or do we know if Navstar is paying the full cost?
With regard to the fuel tanks, I don't know what the relationship is between TransLink and International. I do know that currently with the DPF filters that are being replaced as frequently as even 1 day after a new one's been installed, those are all warranty issues that right now are set to expire in and around the end of December or January. And at about $5,000 a pop, they're lasting nowhere near the length of time that they should. And it's also causing other issues with regard to the oil change frequency, et cetera, to try to get these DPF filters to, and that's what's creating the black plume of smoke out of the back end of these things. So as far as I know, it's warranty work, but that warranty is set to expire in December.
It'd be good to know through the mayor if TransLink is absorbing extra costs they haven't reported out to that on this issue. That's I'm just saying it's a question.
I'm not saying anything to do with TransLink. I'm just on the council.
The other part, I guess, that bothers me the most, I don't know what council will do with this later, but I do find the most troubling aspect is that things happen in this world and mistakes happen. And I received some emails from people who were no longer receiving services, and they phoned and talked to TransLink and got no response as to what was going on and why their service wasn't showing up. And this has been going on for a long time, and I think that's horrible. When we talk about a council trying to get people to use transit, and when you purposely make transit unreliable, and then we had a report last week showing these bus routes, the community shuttle in Coquitlam, cost X amount because we don't have the ridership on them. But if you're riding and you can't, around the table here, if your bus isn't showing up when it's supposed to, after the second time, you're most likely going to give up. But TransLink wouldn't even tell the general public that they serve that this was going on. Now, I don't know how we can deal with that, but I think that the issues of the members and the public in this issue is horrible. But the other part of it is the lack of stepping up in front and admitting the problem and telling the public.
May I speak to that?
Go ahead.
Okay. Currently, right now, TransLink is undertaking a survey of the riders. It's online. It expires November 6th. One of the things we all know, the transit referendum failed earlier this year. The provincial, and I don't want to get into political bashing, but the provincial government put it to a referendum. It failed. It allowed the voters to decide the fate of the transit system moving forward today. Currently, TransLink's survey is asking the riders to select the premium routes that they want to support at the expense of smaller routes. And that is a real problem developing, especially for a community like Coquitlam East. You're looking at real changes to your transit system. Currently, I can go down to Coquitlam Station and catch a 160 to downtown Vancouver. It's going to cost me $275. Under the new plan, they're going to do to you exactly what they did in Richmond. They had a 98B line service that took you from Richmond Center all the way downtown. Now riders are expected to get onto either community shuttles or fractured transit routes to get to a SkyTrain station, then take you downtown today at a premium rate. So the 160 I'm going to use as the example is going to get diverted up into the Eagle Ridge area up here, and it's going to end up going along Barnett Highway, left on Wellington, truncating at Brentwood Station. Your residents who now have a one-zone fare to get downtown are going to either have to transfer at Hastings and Wellington to a packed 135 that's already overloaded and crushed, or they're going to have to take the SkyTrain down to SkyTrain at Brentwood Station and catch not one, but two SkyTrains to get downtown because it's and at a premium rate. And the reason I raise this, you're absolutely right, Councillor. This survey is being done without approval from the TransLink board right now. It is being conducted by management-level TransLink bureaucrats who are then going to project the same ideology that existed with the referendum. The users decided that we can do this with the service here, and those responses are going to be based on the majority riders. So on on a 49 in Vancouver. The people that don't go to Champlain Heights are going to get voted out. That route extension is going to get voted out. People are going to take the best and easiest and shortest solution, but it's going to come at the expense of your routes here. Those optimizations aren't happening by chance. They are looking at those low numbers, saying they cost this much. We got to take it down to here. I've talked to Mayor a lot about people being forced into cars because there's no transit service. Burke Mountain's a classic example of that. If you provided a community shuttle up into that area, they will come. But if you keep pulling it away from that area, which is going to happen, you're going to get more and more people into those cars. And somebody said earlier, you need to build bigger parking lots at SkyTrain. You're going to have more SkyTrain services, but you're going to have people commuting back and forth from their homes to those instead of using transit to get up into those areas.
Two things you failed to mention. One, the 160 will operate local service in Burnaby. Number two, the Broadway station's over capacity.
Yes, I mean, it's absolutely insane. If I was a resident out here, I'd be screaming bloody murder to say, hold on, and the 98B line out of Richmond, the people that are now expected to get onto the SkyTrain, it's at capacity, I think. How are they ever going, like you guys are going to experience a triple effect here. You're getting onto 2 SkyTrain lines after a bus ride.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Wilson had a question. I'm sorry.
Just one more. And later on we have a point about a service issue on one route I think you want to talk to later.
About the
safety issue.
Oh, the safety issue on the thermal drive. We had our community, our health and safety reps did a field test on thermal drive. I have the report in here, and there was some people from Coquitlam that were on that test. It was deemed that the conventional bus couldn't do it. It was almost impossible. It actually overheated doing the testing. There was 9 people on the bus, on the community shuttle bus. In the report, it states that there was going to be some issues with the grade. There was going to be some issues with the placement of bus stops. I guess they said that the community shuttle bus could serve as a calming for that street because they were having issues with speed down that street. So I guess from what they're saying, in my experience, if anybody's stuck behind a community shuttle, they try to pass it. They don't wait for it to get up the hill. So that would create a huge safety issue for us as well as for drivers. If we do, I'll just kind of touch on something as well. The community shuttle bus is kind of unique because it has a lift at the back of the bus. The operators that operate these buses have to, if they get into an accessible stop, they have to get out of the driver's seat, go all the way around to the outside of the coach, which is now into traffic, you have to remember. So if they're stopped on a single lane, or what they were saying is there could be cars parked on either side of that road because it's quite narrow, for the bus to go between them, if they have to get into a stop, they are now creating basically a block. So the driver has to get out of the driver's seat, go down outside, all the way around into traffic, and go all the way around and go to the back doors, open them up, then go inside the coach, and then do all their stuff inside, make sure everything's good, and then release the lift down. So not only are they putting themselves in danger by doing this, by going outside the coach, accessibility is going to be another issue because they said they were going to have some issues with because of the incline and certain spots on that route. Our health and safety committee, which comprised of a conventional operator and a community shuttle operator, both found that the route was dangerous and it was unsafe.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks for coming and letting us know about these health issues. My question was about what's WorkSafe BC's involvement in this. You said there was 12 or 8 drivers who had submitted WorkSafe.
Yes. So there's actually been, in our workplace, if I am exposed to fumes today and I have a reaction, I might have a WorkSafe claim, but it's not one that's actually processed. So we have 126 exposures. Of that, there's been 12 that have advanced to a WorkSafe claim. Unfortunately, TransLink has a propensity to appeal all of the decisions out of WorkSafe, but those 12 claims are so far upheld, and there's the I think one person, I don't know what the longest absence was, but the effect has been quite egregious to these people. So 126 exposures.
So is WorkSafe looking into it at all? Like, there any kind of investigation being done, or?
Well, the WorkSafe, initially, the safety committee out, Bill and the safety committee reps out in Fort Coquitlam Transit Center there, filed a concern. There was an investigation by the company. The company sort of soft-played it and said, we'll do this nominal testing. They continued their upset toward this issue, advancing it to WorkSafe. WorkSafe has come in and given several orders, actually, and really one of the most recent ones was that they have to go out to a third party, saying basically the testing that Coast Mountain Bus Company's been conducting is far from sufficient. Third party provider Total Safety has been brought in, doing a very comprehensive multi-level testing, using the safety committee as resources. That inspection report, unfortunately right now, is marred. Some of the sample pellets that are used for the testing by the provider of the pellets had acrolein exposure to it, so we've got to redo some of the testing. But it's been a very comprehensive testing. WorkSafe has come on side to the workers for the most part, and through this third-party testing, we've seen some slow results coming in of the testing.
So if you were dealing with asbestos, WorkSafe would just shut it down, but because this isn't something like asbestos, they're allowing it to continue?
It's still below the maximum allowable limits of WorkSafe, but there have been moments where the spikes have gone above that. So and that's why I made the reference at the beginning that we still feel like we're the canaries in a mine. We know that there's exposure here. There's nobody that's disputing that there is a emissions issue with these coach. That's what the class action lawsuit's about. And the fact that we've got 12 WorkSafe claims that are approved identify that there is an issue there. Why the testing results haven't provided that, other than these anomalies, is it's either environmental or, like, it could be environmental. Maybe Coquitlam is more toxic than we think, but don't put that on record. But
on the record now.
but as far as that goes, those spikes are there, and that's why there's still ongoing testing. We appreciate that Coast Mountain Bus Company has worked to the degree that it has to get these replacement buses here, but it's 18 months too short. It's 12 exposures too much. It's 126 people, that have been victimized since our initial complaint. They bought faulty equipment. There's no denying that they knew that. And it's come today at the taxpayer's expense, the health of the worker, the rider, and service reliability for every city that these equipment operate in. So altogether, bad deal.
Yeah, no, that's ridiculous. So as a council, is there anything you would ask us to do?
I think with regard to you're going to be aware that you're going to have more service loss throughout the remaining of this year and early next year until the new equipment comes. So don't be hoodwinked by TransLink when they suggest that service is all fine and fluffy. It's not. You will still see an impact because every day 3 to 4 exposures pop up on my email indicating that this problem is still unresolved and affecting workers. We do have an accommodation in place at Coast Mountain Bus Company that if anybody has a medical issue, or even, and this is the first time we've been able to initiate an accommodation without a medical condition, even if they just have an underlying fear of exposure, that they will be accommodated into a general GM coach, a gas coach, and that'll help alleviate some of the issues, but the equipment is still out there in your communities. So is there a general ask about that? Bill.
Well, like I said, and this is coming directly from the members, I mean, you have to remember that these people make relationships with everybody they pick up, because this is, a 4-month sheet or sometimes even longer. So not only is it for the passengers, for the children, for the elderly, it's also for themselves. I mean, another 6, they've already had to endure this for 18 months. Now we got to deal with it for another 6 months. What are we asking? I have, and it's very, I'm going to get emotional here, but I have people that are trying to get pregnant. They've lost children because, and I can't say for sure that this is the cause of it, but tell me that it isn't. because not to mention the stress that they're going through. I just want to touch on one thing about this motor. Can I?
No, we've heard a lot tonight and today, and we really have to get along. And
Okay,
it's not,
absolutely. Thank you for your
I
time.
just had one follow-up question, though.
Okay.
The third-party testing comes to show that these spikes are definitely the cause of it. Then what do you think will happen? Just more buses coming up from Surrey and
Well, no, there are, one of the things that optimization has also come to be realized is that they've reduced the spare ratio for equipment at TransLink. So for every bus we park, there has to be a replacement brought from somewhere. Right now, you're at a 0 spare ratio for this. So if the testing comes back, and this has been the very stiff challenge that we've been facing, if the testing comes back and there are spikes or an issue that WorkSafe or the union or the employer feels that there's merit to do something as egregious as parking this equipment, then we have to deal with it at that point. But that's not far from my thoughts. As president of the local, it's definitely on the minds of the workers. And we've been working to try to find a solution outside of that because we do know how it just impacts far too much. I mean, your service here would be decimated in Port Coquitlam if those buses were parked. Yeah, sorry, Coquitlam. Yeah. So it's as a result of that, the Tri-City, the whole Tri-City area would be impacted, and it's not something that we would see. But so we're hopeful that the company is doing a lot of modifications right now. We're encouraging them to continue to try to work with Navistar to find something. But enough's enough. Eventually, when these test results that we're engaged in right now come back, it takes about 2 weeks for those samples to come back. Once those test results come back, we'll hopefully, fingers crossed, find a modification that works. If not, we'll have to deal with it at that point prudently and responsibly for all the vested stakeholders.
well, especially the drivers. It's ridiculous.
Well, I mean, there's one driver, but there's how many passengers?
24.
24 passengers on a community shuttle coach, and so it's our communities.
Thank you very much, Mr. Woods, Mr. Muirhead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Item 5 is a report providing an update on dog conflict management initiatives. We have introductory comments by the Assistant City Solicitor. The report's before you for information.
Thank you. Are you going to make a presentation or just open to questions at this stage?
I believe the Assistant City Solicitor has some opening comments.
Thank you. And good afternoon, committee. It's my pleasure to be back today after our summer enforcement and education campaign. As committee may recall, the issue of dog-human conflict, which is not a new issue for the city, but an issue that came to the forefront of council and staff's attention earlier this summer in the context of the Mundy Park Forest Management Plan that was presented to committee by the General Manager of Parks, Recreation and Cultural Services in May. A lot of the public feedback through that process focused on the relationship between dogs and humans in Coquitlam's parks. And at that time, committee asked the Bylaw Enforcement Group to think about some ways to manage that conflict through education and through enforcement. And our group reported back to committee in July with some interim updates about the education and enforcement campaign that we undertook starting in June. And at that time, we committed to come back at the end of the summer and report back on our final findings from that blitz, and that's the purpose of today's brief report.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marsden has a question, and Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Some good information here with regards to what's transpired at council direction. I noticed that it looks like the numbers kind of follow the old 80-20 rule in terms of people obeying the rules versus some infractions. I know there's 251 tickets issued. Do we have some numbers as far as what percentage of those are actually collected, given the challenges we have with identification, et cetera? Do you have some numbers for us?
I think this time it's probably premature. The tickets wouldn't have gone through their full cycle of dispute and collection, but collection is definitely less than full issuance, and that's typical with all city bylaw enforcement, that we are unfortunately unable to collect everything that we issue.
Okay. And during this time period, this 251 tickets would compare to historical trends how?
Well, I think that this is an increase in the number of tickets over previous times because we were taking a heightened enforcement approach to the dogs in the park issue and to ticketing generally. Historically, we have not had we have from time to time done blitzes of this nature, but this would be a higher level of ticketing.
Okay. So I know that we spent about 50 hours a week on this with the heightened enforcement. I'd be interested in knowing the percentage increase in terms of but what's that increase in manpower, and what's the increase in result? And from that, noting that we did this June through September, did we start to see behavioral change? Did we see changes in behavior? So if we're going to spend this extra money on the resources and $6,200 in thank you for obeying the rules paraphernalia, did we see the behavioral changes that council was hoping to see in terms of people obeying the rules? So do we see a reduction, year over year? Was it trending downward? If it was warnings in June, did it peak in July and trend down through September? I'd be interested in seeing that sort of information to support whether or not the money was well spent. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. Is there do we have an idea of the difference between the activity in the fall compared to the summer? Does it drop off dramatically, or does it stay fairly constant in terms of dog walking in the parks?
Sure. It is particularly a problem in the summer, and it does start to reduce specifically as it gets darker earlier, so people aren't in the park till 9 p.m. And with the weather changes, a lot fewer people are in the park.
So the enforcement now would obviously drop in. Okay. It talked about how when a police officer went with the bylaw officer, it was a lot more effective. Would we consider trying to engage auxiliary officers on a more regular basis to accompany them?
That is certainly something that we intend to look at if we do decide to do this again next year when we do it, is having more officers accompany for these sorts of blitz type of undertakings and initiatives. Typically, we haven't had that in the past. We have contacted the RCMP when we've encountered a particularly difficult situation, and if they're able to attend, they will attend with us. But it's certainly something that we can consider, yes.
Okay, great. And then Councillor Marsden referred to, was there a perception of behavioral change? In your opinion, was there?
I think the education component was particularly helpful in terms of changing behavior. I think there was, a tremendous uptake on the Train Your Human campaign, and I think that educated a lot of people. People who don't want to comply will not comply necessarily, regardless of how much education. But I think there was the general tenor was that there had been an improvement, and that the education component had been particularly helpful.
And in response to Councillor Marsden's question about the differences in our presence in the park, I think year-round averages are closer to 12 to 20 hours per week, whereas as part of this blitz, we were doing about 50 hours a week in the park. So a fairly marked increase in the number of hours that staff were in parks.
And then the last question was, I thought when this initial report came to us to approve the program, there was a reallocate or a request for more funding. I thought it was around $60,000 or $40,000 or something like that. And here it says there was no additional cost. So was I mistaken on that, or were you able to bring it in under budget, or?
The original report that the General Manager of Parks, Recreation and Culture Services brought forward had a number of components dealing largely with park infrastructure, and you may be thinking on some of the budget requests from that.
Oh, yeah, no,
the
I thought it was this.
enforcement component was done as a pilot project by reallocating existing resources. So essentially we used all of our auxiliary staffing hours to increase the hours from 12 to 20 per week to about 50 per week.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Mayor Stewart, Councillor Zerillo, and Councillor Asmunsen.
I'm not sure whether it was the enforcement or the education that had the effect, and I'm only talking anecdotally, but I rode my bike throughout the summer and noticed more people in the park that weren't dog walkers. And we'd often heard from people that said, I can't go to that Mundy Park in particular, I can't go there because of the number of off-leash dogs around the clock. There seemed to be, in fact, there was a running club at one point. I ran into some runners that were running through the park for the first time in a while because they were able to count on there being fewer off-leash dogs in the afternoon than they would otherwise encounter, and they couldn't very well run in a park where one of them might get tripped up or worse by an off-leash dog. So I get the impression that counting just the number of people that were there for other purposes than walking their dog, it was having the right effect. We also got lots of complaints, as you know, from people who got tickets saying, how dare you enforce your bylaws without warning me or something like that. But at the same time, we also heard from some people that said, thank you for finally doing that, because now I can take my dog to the park where I couldn't take my dog even in the afternoons because it reacts badly to off-leash dogs or things like that. So I thought it was successful. I think it was a good balance. I still worry about those that perceive that they can just leave their ID in the car. Though I know that the bylaw folks were saying, look, we can wait in the parking lot till you come back and we'll take down your license number and that sort of thing. I actually anecdotally ran into one woman, or one person rather, I didn't want to mention the gender, so I won't, who is a frequent writer to council about the lack of enforcement of certain rules, not related to dogs, but I ran into her with her dog off leash at one point, and it was a kind of an awkward conversation. But anyway.
You made it deliberately so.
Oh, yes, it was quite awkward. Anyway, I'm pleased with the report as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Zerillo.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that it was a successful pilot, and I'm just narrowing in on the last sentence of the conclusion of this report that just basically talks about the data collected and future enforcement. So I guess my question as we sit around the table today or before we leave this topic is, what is the compliance number that we can all agree on? I mean, at this point, it looks like it was 17% of dogs were off leash. Can we have a number that we're trying to achieve? Does it need to be 10? Does it need to be less than 10? Is 17 okay? So I'd like to know what's the number so that we can carry on. And then how often will this compliance be measured? I'd like to know how often. Are we going to check it quarterly? Are we going to check it twice a year? But I think that we've made such headway here that we should carry on with measures in place of how we measure success going forward. So I don't know how through the chair, I don't know if there's a thought of what the number should be.
Is it an issue you would even consider setting a target like that?
To be honest, I hadn't contemplated setting a target like that. We certainly can at council's direction if that's where we'd like to go. 17% we can still do some work there, and I think that's something. Why don't we monitor this over the next year? I understand that we can undertake a similar initiative next year using our existing resources, and the data that we have gathered will assist us in being as effective as we possibly can. Perhaps we can look at sort of where the numbers are trending. Enforcement initiatives of this nature work best when the parks are most active, which of course is during the summer months. So we would be looking at that again next year, and we can track it again next year and have a discussion about where those numbers are going and how we can bring them down over time.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Asmunsen.
Thank you for a very good report. I'm glad to see the results and better compliance within the park. But I guess what I'd also like to know in the future, though, is the dog issue is the one thing, but I think the increased bylaw, what are we seeing in people feeling about other issues in the park, that people are feeling a lot safer being in the park from other things, different things going on in the park for kids or people living in the park or whatever. So I would like to sort of, those are some, I think, other aspects of this extra enforcement that while it's not, we're focusing on the dog issue, but I think that extra bylaw enforcement that we're having in there provides other beneficial effects. I'd like to maybe sort of see, we can see from some of the staff that do the bylaw enforcement, if they can sort of note on there that there's a change in those type of behaviors within the park and it's becoming a better and safer place all around for people to use.
And one of the stats that we did present in this report is the number of tickets for unrelated to dog issues that or violations that were observed. So there was a nice symbiosis with the Smoking in Parks campaign that our staff were, of course, well aware of and looking for as well. So that's something that as we get more data from doing this for a longer period of time, we'll be able to report back on a more systematic level about the types of experiences parks users are reporting to us and our interactions with them at an enforcement.
Looking forward to hearing.
Thank you very much. Motion to receive?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Hodge. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Passes unanimously. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Sure.
Thank you. Richard? That's what I was talking to you about. Would that be
Actually, that'd be a little bit.
Yeah. I'd just like to add an item, if I could speak to it.
Oh. We called for OB's beginning, and there was nothing.
It's an action item related to a delegation.
Delegation.
Okay.
What I'd like to ask council consideration is that council send a letter to TransLink in regards to their lack of communication of the affected services in the Tri-Cities or Coquitlam area, and why they would inform our public to the issues of the service problems going on here. I think we need a response from that to our public. I think it's terrible that people are just left there with no information, as to why. If they came out and said why, people can make other plans and adjust to it. So that's what I'd like to have is why they would not inform the public in the Tri-Cities and inform the cities as through our transit as to why our service, we're not receiving the service that we're paying for.
So this would be a letter that said, if these allegations are correct, why are you not?
No, it has nothing to do. I'm not talking about the allegations. I'm talking about the fact that service has been affected in this region.
Do we know that for a fact?
Well,
yes.
TransLink acknowledges they cancel buses.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a fact.
Okay. Like, that was asserted here. I didn't hear TransLink respond to that, so I just wanted to make sure. The mayor's connected.
Richard.
Yeah.
But it was in the paper.
It's in that article, actually, by Kelly Chernowski. 24 shuttles had been pulled off the road at peak, and as a result, they did have a lot of routes that didn't have buses at all, and they had drivers but no buses available. And as a result, we did hear both at the Mayor's Council on Regional Transportation and at Metro Vancouver, and here for that matter, but granted from one side of it, that people were left curbside for an hour in rush hour or more, and when the bus finally did show up, it didn't have the capacity to carry twice as many people as its 20-person or 24-person capacity allows, and so it became a real problem with service reliability, and so I think the motion is that we write to them expressing concern only over the reliability issue and not about the bus issue that has caused or that is alleged to have caused the reliability issue. It's only about when you don't have a bus, can you let people know, and can you make sure you have enough spares so that you don't have a situation with a driver and no bus?
So my issue is strictly is a service issue to our residents. The other issue of why it's happening, but I think Transit knew about the whole issue, knew about the services being disrupted for months, and didn't tell anyone. And I think that's wrong.
Right. So Councillor Marston has a comment on that.
Thank you. I sat and I listened to the presentation and appreciate Councillor Asmundson's comments regarding it. I will share that I was challenged at the time that at times, Councillor Asmundson, I think you were augmenting their presentation as a member perhaps of the union. You felt it was appropriate to share that. I was challenged by that a bit. I think to your point with what you're asking now in a letter to TransLink, the delegation did not have a specific request for council. I think when delegations come before us, we would hope that they are asking for something specific. it is widely known, and the mayor has acknowledged, we have no control over TransLink. The mayor's council has limited controls over TransLink. This service reliability is an issue. It is one of a multitude of issues that we have with TransLink. And I would suggest that the forum might be when TransLink comes back again. I believe we've been invited to come back and speak to us with regards to the proposed service route changes. I think it's appropriate at that time that we can express to them our concerns. I think it's important that we can, if we have a series of concerns, that we can express those. But as a one-off to spend staff time and staff resources to send a letter to say, you know what, we don't think you communicate well enough. I don't know if that's time well spent. Okay, thank you.
Any other comment on that? Councillor Wilson?
I think our residents want us to do everything we can to make sure that we have the best service possible. And
I would agree. I don't think that's it.
I think we can wait and give the feedback to the people who are here doing the consultation, but I don't think they're the people that we really want to talk to. I think we want to talk to the people who are above them. And I think a letter, I don't think it needs to take a lot of staff time, but I think a letter expressing our frustration with the way this has been handled is appropriate, whether they asked for it or not. We can say, yeah, they didn't ask for it, so let's not do it. But I think, if it's going to make a difference in even in the smallest way for our residents, we should do it.
Mayor Stewart?
I will, oddly enough, I had already decided on my own that I will, as a member of the TransLink Mayor's Council, be writing to TransLink and asking that we be better informed as a community about these kinds of issues related to reliability and about the cause if they care to share that. Quite frankly, that's their operational issue. It's not mine. But it's the reliability issue that their failure to communicate. I would rather include in the opening paragraph of such a letter that council has asked me to write. But I don't have to. This resolution would allow me to say that this is an initiative of council and the council is expressing its concerns rather than just the mayor. Or Councillor Asmussen could do the same as Councillor Asmussen.
Councillor Asmussen?
Well, I think, the point of delegations or tying me into a delegation is unfortunate, and I think a lot of times a lot of delegations come here without asking for an action item or a resolution thing. They come here to present information to council at committee, and there's not always a request or an action item requested out of that. That's quite common. We hear people, and most people have been around here a long time, as delegations information. I want to echo what Councillor Wilson said. I think we have responsibility, even though we don't have authority over, to talk about the respect of our public here and communicating to them. That's all we're asking for. And I think it carries more weight than the couple of people who are staff members coming here, if they come back, on this situation. And it's just asking them to rectify a situation that they don't seem to be wanting to communicate with. So I think it's an issue that's in our community. I think a group came here to speak about a concern within our community and an issue that's in our community. So it's something, and we'll have a vote on it. We can debate it back and forth, but I think it won't take a lot of staff time, but it's simply, as the mayor said, he was going to ask the question anyways. And if we don't care about the issue or service in our community, that's another issue. But if we care about it, I think is what Councillor Wilson is saying, we should step up and say something about it, regardless whether it's transit or something else. I think that's what Councillor Wilson, we do things as
point of order. I don't think Councillor Marsden was saying we don't care. He was saying something else.
Well, I know.
It's not a point of order, but
I know.
accept
I know
it anyway.
I'll leave it at that.
I withdraw my comment.
Okay. Now, Councillor Asmussen, would you be satisfied with having the mayor write the letter, therefore not take staff time, but being able to begin his letter by saying, council has asked me to send this letter? Would that have the same effect?
I have the same effect, yeah.
I would do
the same
something about dealing with Councillor Marsden's objection about the use of staff time for a small thing. This is the use of the mayor's time. He's got unlimited time, we know. So, Councillor Marsden, you want to speak again?
To be very clear, I agree that the issue of reliability is a concern. My point is, it's one of a multitude of concerns. So if we were going to take the time to write a letter, let's ensure that we're addressing a number of the items that we've got concerns with. And I'm sure that they've been well documented over recent months. And so again, to look at this one little sliver of, say, we've got a concern about this, I just don't know that that's the most effective piece. If we want to truly facilitate change, I think in a change of behavior and a specific action, that I think there's a multitude of things that we can forward on to them. So,
well, let's have a show of hands coming around here about whether or not we would
I'm fine with the letter.
support the idea of adding the heft of council to the mayor's letter that he planned to write anyway, allowing the mayor to say that council has asked me to write this letter expressing concern about the lack of communication over the service disruptions in our area. And I think that's what
that's what I'm
satisfies you.
asking for.
Let's have a show of hands. All in favor of supporting that, please raise your hands. Opposed? Carries with Councillor Zarillo and Councillor Marston opposed. So that's the direction. General? I guess the direction to the mayor.
So I have a point of order.
I will say all of council will ask me to write this except this.
Well, just council now. But yeah, point of order from Councillor Zarillo.
Yeah, I heard around the table that there is the opportunity to write letters as a councillor outside of this committee. I think I heard that today. So is that something that we're allowed to do? One single councillor could use city letterhead to write a letter, or
No.
No, just on your own.
I believe in this case, because you're meeting as a committee, if you were to give staff a direction, it would have to be unanimous. As we have 2 members opposing, it will have to be a motion. And because CIC can't do motions, we would have to bring it to regular council.
So move.
Second.
Any further debate? All in favor? Opposed? So it's going to regular
You
council.
can't just give direction.
I was looking to provide insight.
Committee can refer
I
to
can,
something.
point of clarification, in a motion, there's an opportunity to reconsider. This was just an informal show of hands. How do we, I don't think we need to spend any more time on this, and to take more time out there, I don't know is valuable. So if it needs to be unanimous to avoid it hitting the floor out there and discussing this for another half hour, then I'm willing to go ahead, write the letter. I would like to see the scope of it amended. That it's one of a number of concerns. I will leave it to the mayor's good discretion into how far he takes that, but I'd be willing to reconsider my position.
Okay, and I got agreement from Councillor Zarillo that it's okay with her to let this thing go and keep it off the floor of regular council. So we now have unanimous support from council in favor of this general direction that the mayor's going to take. Okay. Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Marston, second by Councillor Zarillo. No, Towner. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
I don't want to touch that thing.